Do you have enough to drink, dear Fiorella?
Yes, I'm equipped with coffee and tea and ready to go.
That's good. A heartily welcome to my podcast, dear Fiorella Erni. We met at the BPW in Bern, BPW it is.
Exactly.
It is the Business Professional Women Club, and there you held your keynote speech, and it was fantastic.
Thank
And
you.
I had to talk to you, and I had to ask you to come to my podcast and tell about your very exciting life, everything you do. You are from Cheetah Stories. That's your company. You will soon tell us what that is. But you are even a negotiation trainer, a negotiator, and a humanitarian worker. So I would like to ask you now, please tell us all about it.
Yeah, it was pleasure. Well, maybe we go just a little bit back in history to give some context. So originally, I'm from Waldkirch in St. Gallen, Switzerland. I have studied my undergrad in Zurich. I studied social anthropology, Arabic literature, and Swahili in my minor. Also, already with the vision to at one point work in the humanitarian field. Then between my bachelor and master, I took a gap year. So I was for half a year in Zanzibar to practice my Swahili, working in an animal hospital and a donkey rescue farm. And then I went directly to Lebanon, where I worked in a nursery school in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. And this is also already where I started research for my master thesis, which was around social identification among Palestinian refugees in diaspora. After that, I went to Geneva, where I studied development studies with a focus on conflict. That was a master of 2 years. And for me, it was clear that I wanted to work in the field for the International Committee of the Red Cross. It was out of question. So then towards the end where graduation came near, that was also the application I've sent, and I didn't really have a plan B if they wouldn't take me. Lucky enough, I had a call and I was invited for an interview. I was 25 at the time, and got recruited to have my first mission in Gaza. And that is, of course, because I had a Swiss passport and I speak Arabic. So that is exactly the profile they were looking for. So at the time in Gaza, I was what we call a detention delegate, mainly visiting prisons and making sure that international standards for the treatment of detainees are respected in prison. So I stayed for a year. And from there, my career in the humanitarian field continued. After that, I was stationed in Lebanon for a while, waiting for my visa to Syria. Then I had my mission in Syria, where I was still in the field of protection, mainly documenting violations of international humanitarian law. I also did a lot of trainings for different armed groups in international humanitarian law, also visited prisoners. And from there, I moved into management positions. So I was 2 years in South Sudan, first as head of office and then as head of subdelegation. And this is then where you manage large-scale humanitarian operations, ranging from still the protection files that I was also taking care of in the Middle East, but then food distribution, cattle vaccination campaigns, hospitals, water projects, and so on and so forth. I had a team of about 100 people. And I was also responsible, of course, for their security, making sure that we're operating safely in a conflict zone. After 2 years in South Sudan, I needed a bit of a break. Most people don't stay that long in South Sudan. It was also a time where there was active conflict. So obviously that is quite draining sometimes, especially when you are responsible for security, because you don't really sleep much. Any phone call you could get any time could be an emergency. So I have decided to sort of see, okay, are there other things for me to do? When I was younger, my dream was to at one point become a diplomat. I have then actually worked after South Sudan for the government for a few months. I abandoned the idea of wanting to become a diplomat because I think maybe less the networker, more the hands-on implementer. And that was, let's say, maybe a bit of a reflection. Okay, what now in my life? So I worked with a career coach, figuring out a bit what I would want to do. And I actually decided to just be sure that I have different options in life. That, okay, I love the humanitarian path and I want to do that, but I also want to have other options. And I decided to do an MBA. So I did an MBA in hospitality management at the École Hôtelière de Lausanne, which was in remote. I've worked also for a while then in Zurich in risk and crisis management consulting for private sector companies, where obviously a lot of what I've learned in humanitarian field is very transferable to business continuity management plans, contingency plans for companies in the private sector. And from there, it's actually per chance that I saw a job opening again in Geneva at the Center of Competence on Humanitarian Negotiation, which is a bit what we call a humanitarian startup. So this is a strategic partnership between the ICRC, different UN organizations, and Doctors Without Borders that specializes in frontline humanitarian negotiation and also building the skills of people on the front line to negotiate. Now, of course, I have specialized myself in negotiations with armed groups when I was in the field. So that was really an interesting opportunity for me to bring these skills to frontline negotiators for different humanitarian organizations and diplomats to make sure that they can bring aid across the front lines safely. I did that for 4 years. My last position was as head of operations. But I've always had this sort of feeling that I would love to be an entrepreneur. And actually out of that came also this idea. And now we're coming to Cheetah Stories that you were talking about. So I am someone who loves high heels. I've always been wearing high heels. I've been wearing high heels in the deepest field, think Syria, think South Sudan. I forgot to tell you that I was also on a mission in the Ebola response in Congo DRC, but I would usually wear high heels. And for me, it's the confidence they give you, the posture they give you, the confidence they give you when you walk into these military headquarters that sometimes, can be a bit intimidating. So you somehow really need to do the personal pep talk before you're having these negotiations. For me, it was high heels. For other women, it might be something else, or also men that sort of builds up their confidence. So yes, so I was always in high heels. Also to say, I was in South Sudan, I was 28, managing a team of 100 people that was, 10 years older, and most of them men. So you do need to sort of build up a bit on that confidence. But there is this struggle, right? Of course, I'm a humanitarian worker, I'm vegetarian since a child. Always struggled with wearing leather. Sort of when I say I want to save the planet, it doesn't make much sense to wear leather shoes. We can talk about that. And the other point is also that they're so incredibly uncomfortable. And I just got very tired of not finding the shoes I want. Just these beautiful, vegan, sustainable, comfortable high heels. And at one point I had this frustrating shopping trip. I was like, okay, that's it. I'll make my own shoes. And that was sort of how the idea was born. For about a year, I was just tossing it around, scribbling on a notepad, how this would look like, what features it would have, how this would be if I had my own company. So it was a lot of thinking. I ordered a lot of different leather samples. So our shoes, for instance, they're made from corn. But in the initial research, I have ordered samples from cactus leather, apple leather, banana skin leather, pineapple leather, what have you, sort of testing a bit, okay, what is what, and also where it is from. Because of course, making a vegan shoe is one thing, but I also really wanted to make a shoe that is, let's say, as sustainable as possible.
Yeah.
So
and
there,
comfortable.
of course,
And comfortable. That's so difficult with high heels.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that is so difficult that I tell you a bit more how we are constructing them. When we come to it. I also brought you a sample. But this is a bit how I got to that. And then the final jump is when Martin, who is now my co-founder, said, well, if you really want to do that, why don't you enter the Founder Institute, which is a startup accelerator? So that's what I started in September 2022. It's like a 4-month super intensive program, 20 hours per week. And I was working full time, right? So 20 hours per week, really, really hard work. And after that, to graduate, you have to incorporate a company. So on the way, that's also then when I asked Martin if he would be my co-founder, because Martin has a very strong background in finance and HR. We actually worked together in South Sudan, so we also knew that we could work really well together. And he is now my co-founder. So that's a bit how I got to Cheetah Stories. It's been a long journey. We incorporated February 2023. And from there, of course, you need to find suppliers. We have 13 suppliers for one shoe, including packaging. And we wanted to be very sure that, all our suppliers have a traceable supply chain, that things, to the extent possible, are sourced in Europe. And if not, that still we have like certified organic materials to make sure that we have a positive impact. And for me, that comes honestly also a bit from my experience in Congo and other countries, where you can just really see how, there's this exploitation of resources. Of course, Congo, you have precious stones, but also whatever has to do with latex, with rubber, with caoutchouc. And you see this exploitation of the land, and also people who are not benefiting from the riches of their country. And I just always say, like, if I have a product, I want everyone to have their share in our success in a way. So this is really, really important for us in the sourcing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we're launching our product in 3 weeks.
Wow.
So this is very exciting. So I'm bringing you a prototype here, which is not yet fully branded, but yeah, so this is corn patent leather.
Wow.
And we're having different other leathers. So it's a really, really exciting journey that we're having together. So yeah, so that's the shoe side. And of course, I'm still continuing with negotiation, which is really my absolute passion. I love it. You work with people, you need to read people. You also have a bit this academic aspect. And this is why on the other side, I'm also working as an independent negotiation trainer for corporate companies. But I'm also focusing a lot these days on women negotiators and further build the capacity of women negotiators. Maybe less when it comes to, external negotiation, or like the contract negotiations or sales negotiation, but really also these personal negotiations to sort of support them in building up this confidence to ask for a higher salary, negotiate their position, negotiate their promotion. So we're coming back to really this idea, sometimes, supporting women to get a little bit more confidence to ask more for themselves. Because I'm always saying women are the most brilliant negotiators when it comes to negotiating for others. And I've seen that in the humanitarian field. I've seen this brilliant women standing at the checkpoint, gun in their face, and they negotiate their way through it. And then when it comes to negotiating their own promotion, they crumble. So I think there we can really help them with some tools. Cut, I bring my dog.
Yeah, okay. His name is Mr. O, huh?
Exactly. Mr. O, or Otello, has wanted to come and join this podcast.
Yeah, so lovely. I don't want to cut it out. I just want to leave it in if it's okay with you.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah. I have one question about the negotiation part. Does that mean your customers today, when you are a negotiation trainer in Europe, could that be even a company where there is a team is struggling, they're not getting along, that you would like go in as a mediator too? Would that be possible?
Honestly, I don't really see myself as a mediator. I think to be a mediator, there is a very specific education for it, and then you have certified mediators. So I would certainly not claim to be a mediator. I think my strength, and this is also really what I've learned and what I did over the past years, is to give people tools, really tools that help them plan and prepare for the negotiation. Because sadly, people still think, a negotiation, you can wing it. If you're good in communication, you can wing a negotiation. And this is so wrong. Like, you need to prepare a negotiation, and you need to prepare every little detail in a negotiation. And there are tools out there. But when we read negotiation books, of the big FBI negotiators, all of them are writing a book. It's more about negotiation tactic, like the communication part, which is super important. I'm not denying that. But you can be as good a communicator as you want. If you're not prepared, in the sense, like, if you do not know 100% what is your objective, what is your ideal outcome, what is your red line, what is your bottom line, when these things come from your counterpart, you are not able to respond with confidence, because you have to on the spot think about it. So these are questions you want to ask yourself beforehand. And then also in the way you present your argument, you really need to know who will be the counterpart in front of you. What is their positioning? What is their reasoning? How do they come to this position? What are their values and motives? And then when you talk to them, you really tailor your argument, your communication to the other side. And that changes from whoever is sitting opposite of you. You need to understand who is influencing this person. Is this person the decision maker? So these are all exercises that you can do beforehand. And it's very important to actually have the tools to do all these reflections before you go into a negotiation. And then once you're in the negotiation, of course, the whole communication part, that is what is important. The listening skills, the empathy, the really hearing what the needs of the other side are, to pivot without losing your ground. Again, these are things that you can practice. And that is part of, every kind of negotiation you might have. That might be a sales negotiation, that might be a contract negotiation, that might be a negotiation with the teacher of your child or your partner or your children, for that matter. Yeah. You negotiate to a certain extent all the time, but I'm not saying, of course, for every single negotiation you have, 2 days preparation. Yeah. But for the really important negotiation, it is worth it. And if you're really prepared, again, you have this confidence. Yeah. That you need to have a really good outcome that is, in a way, a win-win. A negotiation doesn't mean that you want to drag the other side across the table. But sometimes you might want that, but ideally you create value for both sides, and that is a
win-win.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a really fascinating topic. I've done a lot of research on this in different fields, in medical negotiations, also especially for women negotiators. How do we negotiate differently? So that's a bit my field of passion. And then I'm always saying, what better way to be a negotiator than standing tall in a beautiful vegan shoe?
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's such a great idea. And when I saw you in your fantastic high heels, I want to have them. And I'm 1 meter and 80 centimeters tall, so I'm tall already. And I often try to make me smaller when I was a little girl. And now I feel I need those Cheelettos. I need them.
Well, that is wonderful to hear. And I think the standing tall has nothing to do with height, right? It's this posture where, like, here is where I am, feeling fabulous today. Come what may, I'll take it, in a way.
Yes. At the BPW keynote speech you held, you told us a lot about some quite dangerous moments. Would you like to talk about that too today, and how you acted, what happened?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. Of course, at the ICRC, we always say we can talk about what we do, a bit less what we see in public. That also goes with confidentiality, where we really sort of say to build trust with all parties to the conflict, it is very important that we keep things confidential and in a bilateral dialogue. But of course, I mean, certainly when you are in conflict zones, there are a lot of situations that, well, sometimes you're scared. I think for me specifically in Syria, even though we had, let's say, a relatively normal life in the areas where we were living, for instance, in Damascus, there were just days where a lot of rockets were just sort of randomly hitting the neighborhood where we were living. And that is, in a way, something that you cannot calculate because that might, you know, land anytime, anywhere. So we've spent quite a lot of time in safe areas whenever you would have this rocket. But I remember, for instance, one instant where I was sitting in my office and a rocket just literally hit in the yard in the front of the office. So we'd have like shrapnel that was coming, and that's then really when you start running. So these are, of course, situations where yes, you are scared, a lot of adrenaline that you have in these moments, and that also where sometimes it's a quite weird situation in conflict zones when you're not at the active front line. You might have a relatively quiet life, but then reality hits, and you realize, no, I am in a war zone, and this is what the local population is living every day.
Do you have a question to this? We can continue on this, and I can also
I had one question about when the attack came, like the coping with that situation after it. I mean, you went into a security space and all of your team was safe, as I remember. You told us, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the coping after that, how can you sleep at night? Can you come to rest?
Honestly, I think different people deal very differently with such situations. I'm a more rational head person, so I think I can deal with these situations without breaking down at the moment. But for instance, what I'm realizing now, my biggest nightmare in Switzerland are fireworks. Because for me, it's just, explosion triggers adrenaline and tells you, okay, something really bad is happening. So I think it's more in the long run, where I still see that I'm struggling with explosions, with cars backfiring sometimes, like, sort of having this, okay, and then you are ready to run. So different people cope with it differently. We do in high risk missions, we also have staff health delegates, where people who need to speak with someone, they can speak with them. It is true, however, that especially in the humanitarian sector, while mental health and these questions are becoming more important and also more accepted, we still, to a large extent, have a culture of saying, well, if you break down in these situations, you're not cut out for the job. This is still sort of the general feeling. So you're also not very willing to share if something really, really gets to you. So I think this is a problem, because for a lot of people, the sharing would actually help them, and then they could move on. But it's still, I mean, while there is a lot of improvement in this field, it's still not easy to admit that a situation has really gotten to you. Of course, depending also on the degree of the situation. When we think of other situations, I think for me, like what was very stressful for me in South Sudan is where, and that was actually not part of the conflict, that was more criminal attack, but I had one of my staff members that was shot at. And then he was brought to in the middle of the night, and then he was brought to the office, and I was there at the time also with Martin. And you have someone that is very dear to you, that you work with 3 bullets in the body, bleeding, and you have to function, because then I had to call up the surgeons, call up at the time the army to get permission to move across town to the hospital. So these are, of course, super, super stressful situations. And that is something where I realized, for instance, that really got to me, because it's a person I know. I'm obviously in the humanitarian field, you deal a lot with gunshot injuries, with really difficult situations. But the moment you also know the person, you also have the heart in it. And of course, then it's even more difficult to function in a way. And I guess for me, the most challenging mission was the Ebola response in Congo, because there, in addition to everything you might have, you also have a deadly virus that you don't know where, like when it will hit. So you have the pressure of everything, of being in a conflict zone, plus the virus. And I'm sure you followed a bit Ebola responses, but where you also have communities who are scared of the response teams. I mean, you've seen the pictures, everyone dressed up in scary costumes, coming in, burying people without sometimes that much respect for local rights, because you're in emergency mode, where you also get quite violent responses from communities. So for me, that was very scary. I sometimes felt it was easier to negotiate with armed groups one-on-one, because ideally they have a hierarchy, they still follow orders. If you have upset communities, you don't know who to talk to calm the situation down. So for me, that was quite a challenging mission sometimes.
And when you were negotiating, was that always on your own, or were you in a group or a pair of people?
That really depends. It depends what you are negotiating. I always say, I think best is to negotiate in a team. Especially very often it's also quite technical negotiations. So for instance, if you want to negotiate whatever, to have access to an area, to do a food distribution, it's good. You bring your logistician with you, you bring the person actually managing the program with you, so that then you can also immediately come from the more political level of the negotiation that maybe I would have as head of subdelegation getting a general permit, to then in a way bring the negotiation to this different professional level to already also negotiate the details. Sometimes it makes sense to go alone. Sometimes if you really also want to build a relationship with the other side, a relationship of trust, then it might make sense to have these first negotiations alone. Sometimes you also need to choose your team. I have to say I never had a problem to be in these countries negotiating as a woman, but there might be occasions where it makes more sense to send a man, or more sense to send a woman for that matter, but to really pick. And I think this is where in a negotiation it's important to ignore your ego. Like, what is important in this kind of negotiation is that you find the best person who can achieve an objective. It's not about you or about position. So I, for instance, wouldn't have a problem if I'm saying, okay, yes, I'm outranking you in terms of hierarchy, I should be having this negotiation. But if this person doesn't want to talk to me, or I'm not the one to have this negotiation, I don't care if someone who is more junior then actually goes in and achieves the objective.
Yeah. And when you were there talking to, say, a group of men, would any of them say, wow, nice stilettos?
Well, probably more in a joking way.
Yeah, but it was an issue.
It was maybe more I had someone who told me once, a soldier, he was like, when you expect a humanitarian worker, you assume that someone is coming in with sort of a flannel shirt and Timberlands, and then you're in trouble. Because it's the humanitarian coming to tell you what you have to do. And I guess for me, that was also a bit it, right? You shake up the expectation that someone might have of who is coming. And I think especially because I was a very young woman, sometimes, and honestly, I don't blame them. If at now I'm 37, if someone 28 years old comes to me, I'm also a bit like, okay, and who are you to tell me what to do, right? So I understand that. And then even in cultures that are more of a patriarchy, and then you come as a young woman in, to question the legitimacy. Yeah, I think it's normal. But you can also play on that in a way. So for me, it was like underlining maybe the femininity even more. I play on, okay, they already don't take me that seriously, but that can also be an advantage because it's easier to build trust. It's sometimes you would see male colleagues coming in to negotiate with the soldiers, and you immediately have this rivalry, you know, when two men are in a room. So it's like a very different kind of conversation that is very much on the personal. Whereas I would not come in as a threat. They don't have to compete with me. We can have a, you know, open, honest, empathic conversation. And then you play to that, actually, that maybe they see more of a little sister in you, or what have you. And actually, I think especially in terms of security management, it helped me a lot. I think we're quite lucky with the ICC. We talk to all parties to the conflict. So of course you have, you know, the numbers of everyone on speed dial. And because I managed to build this trust with people, and they also, you know, wouldn't mistake me for a spy or something. I sometimes had them actually call me saying, look, maybe on this day, just don't go in this area. Now, of course, they wouldn't inform me of military operations, but then you're just like, okay, maybe we'll just stay put. So that was also really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And how long time would such negotiation take? So is that a week? So for one issue, you want one thing, say food transport. Would that take a day or a week or how long?
Well, that can take from 10 minutes to weeks, months, years. So it really depends. I can only say it depends. I've had a very long, very difficult negotiation in a certain area that took 3 weeks, daily phone calls. And there, I think we also have to understand that, I mean, these are people who live in war. They are under so much pressure themselves. Sometimes, you know, they just lost, for instance, a battle, and then if you come in and say, hello, by the way, could I bring aid to the other side? I mean, we also have to, and I think this is where empathy comes in, and sort of where I also said before, building an argument. Yes, you might not agree with, in general, what the person opposite you is doing or has done in their life. They might not be your best friend, but you need to be able to see the human in people to understand how they come to their conclusion. And once you see the human in anyone, you can talk to them on a human level. And what I think is interesting is that if you strip it down to pure humanity, every human has the same need for security, for, you know, the really basic needs, family, and so on and so forth. And if then you can bring an argument that shows them security, of course, for the army, always very important. If you bring them an argument that shows that the security, for instance, is not threatened, if you can put measures on the table that you will take, that operations will be safe, for instance, it's much more palatable to them than to say, well, but you know, people are starving there. It's like, yeah, well, I know, but security is more important. You need to understand that security is more important, because then you bring a different argument.
And when you learn so many languages, I mean, it's Arabic, but you even have learned Swahili, you mentioned. That was many, many years ago before you then worked. What made you then learn those languages? What's the idea behind that?
Yeah, you know, I'd love to tell you a very glamorous story. So Arabic, I actually wanted to learn Chinese. And then the schedule didn't work. The social anthropology classes were at the same time than the Arabic classes, the Chinese classes. So I was like, well, then let me just learn any other language no one else speaks. Because let's face it, if you study social anthropology, you will work in a museum, wasn't my objective. So this is how I ended up learning Arabic. I haven't been in the Middle East before. I just sort of sat into Arabic classes and learned Arabic. Swahili, I had a bit more of a history, because when I was 17, when I was in high school, I actually had an internship first in the Kangem Islam in Nairobi. And there is where I met the family, and they told me, hey, we have a nursery school in Kajire, which is in the Taita Hills near Voi, and it really needs repair. So I went back to Switzerland. I was 18. I raised money, about 10,000 Swiss francs. and actually went back to Kenya, to that village, and restored that nursery school. And I made that my capstone project for my high school thesis. So
Wow.
that's where I learned the first bits and pieces of Swahili.
Mhm.
And then at university, it made sense for me to continue that. And it also makes sense because Swahili and Arabic, they share a lot of words, because East Africa was colonized by Oman. So you have a lot of Arabic words in Swahili.
Ah, okay. I didn't know that. I mean, I don't know anything about those languages, but I didn't know that. A connection. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So interesting. Fantastic.
Mm.
Yeah. So when we now go back to the Cheelettos, the idea
Always
of
love talking about high heels.
yeah, yeah. But I find it so interesting everything you have done and the fact that you were, I mean, the ground where you were walking on in Sudan or anywhere, it's not asphalt, it's not stable, you know, and you come here with your Cheelettos. I mean, that's wow.
Yeah, but you know, and I think this is also something because like the local women are very, very well dressed and very often also in small heels. I think sometimes us Europeans, we feel like, you know, when I go to Africa, I need to look like a hiker. And I find it's quite offensive to the local people. I remember actually in Kenya and then also in Zanzibar, I had this host mother, and she was ironing her clothes with an iron with charcoal inside because she didn't have electricity. But her clothes were, I mean, she was perfect. She didn't have much money, no electricity. She was washing her clothes by hand, but they were white and they were straight. And then she was at one point, Fiorella, I don't understand why you white people, you have so much money and you cannot even iron your shirt. And I'm like, yeah, no, thank you, point taken. And she was really upset by all the tourists running around. Like, you know, she was like, no. And I think that's also where being well dressed, and that comes with also high heels, going to meet the governor is also a sign of respect
Yeah.
to the people. And this is also where, again, I think showing this respect, you're very differently perceived. But it is true. I mean, it's yes. So that's also where I said I'd love to make comfortable ones where
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
underground would still be not stable, but,
But yeah,
yes.
yeah. And the idea of the cheetah, I love that.
Mhm.
Have you seen them live? Was
I
that the
have,
idea coming?
yeah.
Because they are always on high heels, aren't they?
Yeah, honestly, the idea for Cheetah Stories, the name, initially when I started with it, I didn't think of Cheetah, to be honest. At the Founder Institute in the Startup Accelerator, we had like 1 week where we had to do intensive name brainstorming. And I was sort of, the exercise was to think, what should your shoes represent? What are the emotions you want to create with your shoes? And I was thinking, well, you know, I want this kind of glamour. I want the confidence, the elegance, this beautiful walk, slightly dangerous. And somehow this is where I ended up at the cheetah, because for me, the cheetah really represents all of that. They're these beautiful, very elegant animals that kind of have this beautiful walk. And this is also what afterwards, with the cushions and everything, then inspired the Fitbit that we made. So it was sort of this natural connection that we felt. And if you see a cheetah stretching, it looks a bit like a high heel. So it works really, really well. And in a way, then once we found the name, it co-developed. It's like the whole branding, of course, then went with the cheetah, the stand tall. So in a way, it was this kind of very nice marriage where the moment we found the name, it inspired our shoes and inspired our whole branding, our language. And I'm very happy to see that people really love the name, even though some people are like, yeah, well, a vegan shoe, why would you have like, you know, a carnivore? But I'm like, okay, I get this point.
The paw of a cheetah is so soft. Could you please show me
Exactly.
the shoe again, the one you had
Yes.
before?
Well, you wouldn't see it here, but
Inside.
basically inside, and this is what we want to recreate, right? This really soft cushions that the cheetah paw has, and then when you step on it, it feels a bit like walking on a cloud. So it goes very well together. Yeah.
Nice. And the front side, could you please show me this front side again? Because my
Yeah.
toes are, yeah, I hope it will be okay with me. Unfortunately, my big toe is this much longer than the others, but still, I love yours. They are round. They are not like this.
Yeah. And this is important for us. I think what we're saying is I want to make a really comfortable shoe. It should still look very nice and elegant. But with a pointy toe, it just cannot be comfortable. It's just not possible. I mean, you just squeeze your toes too much. And it's very unhealthy, of course, for your feet as well. So that's why we sort of have a bit this retro shape, if you will, right? It looks a bit like the pumps of the 50s, 80s, the airline flight attendants.
And the height of the heel, how would that be? Is that always the same? 10 centimeters or how many?
We have 9 centimeters.
9?
That's a bit what we also had discussed with a doctor, actually, to understand like what height is still acceptable to avoid injuries to the back, basically. Because of course, when you wear a heel, you change your whole posture, and the higher it gets, the more your spine has to bend. And basically what he said is like 9, of course. It's never healthy to wear a heel. I'm not claiming that. But with
We
9,
don't listen. We don't listen.
exactly. But with 9 centimeters, it is still acceptable. Let's put it that way for your body. So we settled on the 9 centimeters. Personally, I find anything below 9 centimeters, it just shouldn't claim to be a high heel. But that's my personal opinion. We will have one that has 10 centimeters, but also a plateau of 1 centimeter. So in the end, you still have the same elevation of these 9 centimeters. But it's a non-negotiable. I have a lot of people who are like, but why don't you make mid heels? I like the 5 centimeters. I'm like, yeah, and you go buy them somewhere else.
Yeah. It's the way it should be. Yeah, of course. And what about the colors? In what colors will they come?
So we have, and that's really also where we want to get at. We want to have many colors. So we have 9 colors. You have your classic, right? The black, the brown, the dune, the blush. So that's my classic colors. In the beginning, I said I'm not going to make a black shoe, and then everyone was like, "I'm sorry, but you'll have to make a black shoe." So I was like, "Okay, fine, I'll make a black shoe." Now we make 2 black shoes in different leather qualities. Anyway, but then of course you've seen the red. We have a green. We have orchid, candy pink. So also the more daring colors. And personally, I love having colorful shoes because when obviously this is a shoe that you will wear to work, and let's face it, most of us wear gray, dark blue, black, maybe white to work, but few people wear a pink suit to work outside, maybe. Yes. And then it's just so brilliant if you can just have this spark of color on your feet and just makes this really nice statement. So I love to have the bold colors.
Yeah. And you mentioned before that you had different fabrics. You had tested apple, cactus, mice, and now it's mice. Sorry, that's German.
Corn, exactly. So we have corn and
Mhm.
mycelium, which is made from the root-like structure of the mushrooms.
Ah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. And all of it is now produced in Italy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we source the leather in Italy, not far actually, a 1.5-hour drive from where our shoes are handmade. So they're handmade in this small family-owned factory that works with very big brands, really the luxury brands, but they are now moving more towards sustainability, so they take on startups. So yes, the outside leather is coming from nearby. Of course, also corn. Italy has a big corn industry. For the lining, we're collaborating with an innovation lab in Milan that sort of created a lining for us that is breathable, that also does some thermal regulation. Then, of course, the heels, that's recycled plastic, as in half recycled, I think the ratio. I'd have to look it up, but they come from nearby as well. The outsole tunit is rubber, is coming from nearby as well. So this is also why it's nice to produce in Vigevano. We produce in Vigevano, and a lot of different suppliers are also there. Some elements, so we will try to source in Germany. Some elements come from Barcelona, specifically for the footbed. Some come from Germany, also specifically for the footbed. And then, as I've said before, of course, latex, which is also inside. Well, it doesn't grow in Europe, so that doesn't come from Europe, but that's where we make sure that it's certified, that it has not a horrendous environmental impact. Same thing for the packaging. And I think for us, sometimes, you have to ask yourself this question. Maybe if you produced your box in Thailand, just an example, maybe XYZ could be a more sustainable material, but then you fly it from Thailand to Italy. And if you produce it in Italy, it's half an hour drive from where your shoes are going. So there are a lot of reflections that you have to make, like, okay, what are the priorities in terms of production? But I think for us, we really said we want to avoid having a product where everything is flown in to a place and then flown out again, because of course we're also exporting. So we're really trying to shorten transport ways to the extent possible.
And it must have taken a lot of time to find all those suppliers. I mean,
yes.
because you were not from that. This was not your thing before.
No, not exactly. No, it was. I mean, we're extremely lucky because our shoe manufacturer, the person who works with us, our focal point, well, I can also mention his name, Gabriele Blandina. He's a wonderful person. He has his own startup, actually, Cremagno, and they make vegan shoes, but they're flat. So we were very lucky because he has already had a lot of done a lot of research himself that we could learn from. But then, yes, but there are these fairs, like industry fairs. For instance, in Italy, there is Linea Pelle, where everyone who makes elements for a shoe is there to exhibit. I think what is challenging is one thing to have all vegan materials. And for us, that is really important. No compromises on the vegan part. I think the impact of the leather industry on our planet is just so disastrous. And with innovation we have in the field, green technology, making bio-based vegan leather, you just really don't need animal leather anymore. But the industry is still dominated by leather. And even even in the back counter, for instance, which is not outside, but you very often still have animal derived products. So one thing was to really get suppliers that are all vegan, but then also to go a step further to find the most sustainable piece. And very frankly, we're not there yet. We don't have yet heels that are 100% recycled plastic. We go with what we can find right now on the market that is the most sustainable. And then for us, the commitment is then to carry out further research to get to a point where we have an even more sustainable solution. But also, like sustainability in the shoe industry, one thing is with the elements that you choose to make the shoe with. But the other problem is that, like, 300 million shoes are being thrown away per year. So that's about 20% of all the shoes produced that are just being dumped, because most designers work with collections and they have 2, sometimes even more collections per year. And if they don't, and then stock, right? So if they don't sell it anymore, well, either they send it at a discount, and whatever they cannot sell, it's being thrown away because next year you cannot wear it. So for us, this is also very important. We work with timeless designs. We're not working with going with the fashion trends every year, something new. For us, it's important that at least our base collection is a timeless collection. Then when we work with limited editions, it would be made to order, sort of having really, really small quantities produced. And this is how we can also reduce the waste in the shoe industry. And at the same time, we're also providing sort of a piece of extra leather, extra heel cap, so you can repair your shoe should something happen to it. So I think sustainability really needs to be thought through from beginning to the end. And in the long run, we don't offer that yet, to take the shoes back and recycle them. We don't offer that yet because we don't have the capacity to do it. But I think that would also be the objective in the long run that we have.
And when you show your shoe before, it is there's a polish on it. Are all shoes polished? No.
So this is so I'll just show it again. This is the patent leather quality that we're having. Then we have, it's always a struggle whether you should use real animal leather terms to describe it, but it's just easier. Then we have something that is more of a Napa leather, if you will, that is made from mycelium mushroom, and then something that looks more just like a very normal leather finishing that is again made from corn.
Wow, fantastic.
Exactly. So we have we have 3 different leather qualities that at the moment we're working with, but this is also something that we constantly innovate. At the moment, we have between 48 to 75% biomass content in the vegan leathers. Of course, the objective is also to go higher. There are some products there. We need to try them. We need to work them on the last and see if that would also work.
Yeah. And how about the selling? Is that always on your website, your platform, or are you going out to different shoe shops?
Yeah. We start certainly with e-commerce, but we're looking at a very high quality product that obviously also comes with a price tag, so people will want to try it. And that's also what we've heard a lot. It's like e-commerce is difficult in that segment. So of course we have our web shop, but then we also look now, for instance, at pop-up locations where people can come try on the shoes, and then later on, of course, we look at marketplaces, we look at retailers. For this, you need a stock. We are still quite small, so as I said, we're launching 18th of July with different events in Switzerland, Lugano, Geneva, Zurich, but also in Milan and in London, where we do open photo shoots where the public can come, try on the shoes, and actually experience it. Because very honestly, it's amazing when someone steps into the shoes, they make this very cute face because it's like the first time the heels are so soft. And then this wow effect is what we really want to give
So
them.
nice. You have to take photos each time.
Exactly. We really need to capture that because it's really quite special, as in it's very sweet.
Yeah.
It's so different to step into heel and you're like, oh wow, and you really get this face. So we want to give exactly this effect to people, and then hopefully after that they will then buy them online. I think what is a plus from the way we work, I just spoke before a bit about collection, given that we have all our models will have the same shape. Of course, maybe then afterwards, say open toe, have a bit of a chunkier heel, but the model and the foot bed, it will be the same in all the shoes, meaning you bought it once. After that, when you found the perfect size, you can buy any shoe that we make and it will fit you. So once you had this first chance to try them somewhere, I think then that will also facilitate, of course, that people can directly order online. But we do. I mean, it's clear that we will need to, in the long run, get into different retailers where we position our product as well.
And are you coming to Bern too, please?
Would love to come to Bern. Now, no prejudices, but it's not a city where I've seen women wearing a lot of high heels.
Okay. We should change that.
I agree we should change that, absolutely. But I think for us, Zurich, of course, is a very interesting place to launch. But no, we would love to bring the high heel movement to Bern. And yeah, also have
think of everybody who's working in the Bundeshaus. Wouldn't that be great to have?
That would be fantastic. Yeah. We should even have a little branded version.
And what about the sizes? Mine is unfortunately an 8 in EU. I think is 8. Otherwise, it's a 42 because of my large toe. Yeah. Are you going to 42 or is it beneath? Is it 41?
We go to 41.5.
Okay, maybe
maybe that can work. So this is also something like we're starting with the smaller sizes. Like we did a bit of an assessment, right, in our target market. What are the main sizes at the moment? We were mainly focusing on women's shoes. But it's also the plan that down the line, we're also making larger sizes because we think high heels are fabulous and everyone should have the right to wear them. So that's why we also in the long run want to make larger sizes so that so that men or binary people can
yeah.
also wear heels. So that is for us the longer term projection. I think to start with, I'm not sure how familiar you are with shoemaking, but to make a shoe, you need a last, a sort of this kind of plastic foam that then you work the shoe on. And we produce them in all the sizes, and you need several in all the sizes. And obviously they also come at a cost. And if you then go into the larger sizes, it's not just the length of the last that needs to change. Also, it needs to be a little bit broader. And that is just a very big investment to have all this last in stock, all the materials in stock. So we're launching with the female market, but our objective definitely is to, actually sell high heel to every person who would like to wear high heel.
Yeah.
And I hope we'll
Lovely.
have high heel lovers of all genders who will,
Yeah.
show off their
Yeah.
Cheelettos.
Great. Oh, it's fantastic. Thank you for that. It's a fantastic idea. We haven't talked about veganism yet. What was the initial cause for you to be vegan?
Yeah, so I started as a vegetarian, to be honest. I'm a bit
Me too.
on and off vegan vegetarian. So I'm vegetarian since I'm a very small girl. I think it was like 7 or 8 around that time. I grew up in the countryside, surrounded by more industrial animal farming. We had a lot of animals, and I think my mom adopted just about any animal that needed a home. So I also grew up with this beautiful pink pig called Abigail. She was wonderful. Well, she grew to be like a 250-kilo pig at one point, but she was absolutely adorable. Anyway, we had horses, we had dogs, rabbits, literally anything you can find. And animals were always my best friends. Like, we lived quite isolated, so they were really my best friends. But also when you look out of the kitchen window at my mom's home, there is also a pig stable where they farm pigs, and you can hear them, but I've never ever seen them because during the 9 months that they live, they don't go outside once. And I think it was one night and they usually load them on the truck in the middle of the night with flashlights and tasers. It's really not a pretty picture. And I woke up with the sound of them being loaded on the truck. And it was very traumatic for me to kind of see them finally coming out of the stable, terrified with the lights and everything, and asked my mom what was happening. And then, she explained, well, they're being slaughtered to be eaten. And then I was like, no, this is not working for me. And that's when, as a child, I realized this connection between the animal and what you're eating. So that was clearly like the first reflection for me was clearly my love for animals. And it was 30 years ago, right? It was not a time where a lot of people were vegetarian, as in my family was not vegetarian. My mom was very open and, cooked a lot of vegetarian dishes. But I also remember the conversations I'd have with a lot of people that would like trick you, be like, oh, but this is a sausage. This is not meat. I was like, I'm not stupid. Don't treat me like I am. And it was tricky because you would go to, the skiing camp, the Skilager. I think the first one was 4th grade, and I was terrified to go because I was like, what am I going to eat? And I think for a week I ate salad and bread, because it was just not a time where you would think about these things. Now you have like a whole variety of options. So I was vegetarian until I think like 18. With 18, I moved out. I went to study in Zurich. That's when, for a while, I chose to be completely vegan. So I went through my completely vegan phase, still at a time where there were very few vegan products. And then sort of the last years, I was more vegetarian than vegan, but I'm back to being mainly vegan, less vegetarian, because let's face it, I mean, some people tell you veganism is a bit extreme, but that's just where I'm saying, well, if you're vegetarian and you finish the thought, it's just the only logical thing you can do, like be it for the well-being of animal, because clearly, I mean, a cow to produce milk has a baby that is being killed to be eaten. So whether you drink the milk or you eat the baby, well, same in the end. And sometimes I'm even saying probably a cow that can keep its baby to be raised for meat production might be happier than a milk cow. So if you think animal well-being further, it just really makes sense to be vegan. On the other hand, I'm also saying, so for me, I'm saying I'm 90% vegan, as an 100% vegetarian, 90% vegan. I also feel like dietary choices shouldn't feel like, you're trapped, torture. It has to be that all the time. I think, honestly, I love eating, big fan of eating. I love cooking. So I think you should have this pleasure. And if sometimes you really feel like having a fondue, well, then by all means, have a fondue. I think it shouldn't be cause of depression, but also there. I mean, why not then make sure it's an organic one where, the living conditions of animals were better than other ones. So I think we don't have to torture ourselves with our choices, but I think conscious living is very important. And then, of course, if you think it further now with the whole environmental impact, it just logically, it just does not make sense to be anything else than vegan. And then, of course, again, every now and then you make a compromise, but I think on the big scale of things, it's where we have to go. And this is also why I'm saying we have so many alternatives, and this is beautiful what is now coming out and all the options you have. Same thing for leather. So there is another way, and I'm very happy to see that it's going in, hopefully, in the long run, in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking, you mentioned the environmental cause, even the health cause is so important. That is something I always talk about in my workshops, and many people don't realize that plant-based fats and proteins are better than the animal ones.
Yeah.
So, but all of this is not educated in the schools yet.
Yes. Yes, no, absolutely. And fun fact, like when I decided to be vegetarian, I had like all the kids and their parents telling me, oh, but you won't grow when you don't eat meat. 2 years later, I was the tallest in class. I was like, yeah, no, I think you were wrong. So it's true, like you don't need it. Personally, I also know for myself, for instance, I suffer from migraines. And whenever I'm really, strict vegan for a few weeks, it drastically reduces the migraines that I'm having. So you can immediately see an impact when it comes to health, also weight, and so on and so forth. But this, I think, it's also a bit of a problem of the lobby. I mean, we're still being told, drink milk, it's healthy. Whereas where you're like, yeah, but it's not really natural, is it? I mean, we're the only mammals who drink milk after having been babies and drinking from our mom. So, and it's still in this, but you need it. And I love how everyone always, but you need the protein. And then my question is always like, well, then why don't you explain to me what a protein actually does to you? And no one knows what a protein actually does to them. They just hear, meat, protein, red meat, iron. They have no clue what they actually need, and that you can just as well get it from kidney beans, even more. So yeah, we need much more education in this. And I think that's also honestly a bit of responsibility from the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And the strongest animals are vegan.
That is very true.
And Patrick Baboumian says that all the time. The strongest animals are no, and me. Patrick Baboumian.
Yeah, that is very true. Very true.
Yeah. Something crossed my mind. Sorry for my jumping back and forth to
No worries.
Cheelettos. When you talked about the shoes, are you even considering maybe someday when everything is going well, and it will, I'm certain about that, to have a nice bag to the shoes, a little one?
Yes, so that's why we call it Cheetah Stories. So we're saying in stories you can have chapters, and there are definitely a lot of ideas that we're tossing around to say once we have the shoe, then there are a lot of different things that you can make that is also matching. Actually, in the beginning, my idea was like, I'll make shoes with a matching purse and that and that. And then I went to the Startup Accelerator. They were like, do you have any idea how long it takes to develop a shoe or a purse? I was like, no. But now that it took me 14 months to develop a shoe, I'm a bit more humbled to say, if you want to have a real quality product, you need a lot of time for product development. So we start on the shoe, but the idea definitely is afterwards to go further and also to have matching things, especially because we work with bold colors. And a lot of people have the argument, yeah, but you know, bold colors, I cannot combine it with anyone. I cannot match it with anything. So it's our responsibility to give people things to match them with.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Fantastic. Oh, I'm so happy you did that. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me your time to talk to me and to tell all your stories, not just the cheetah stories, but also
all the stories.
And when people want to contact you, is that the best to go to your website, cheetahstories.com?
Exactly. So we have a www.cheetah-stories.com, and we're also on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Our Instagram handle is at cheetah_stories, where you can find us. And hopefully, as of July, you'll also be able to purchase our Cheelettos. And I'm hoping that many of your listeners will become convicted cheetah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Convinced.
Convinced, yes.
So wearers.
Convinced. Absolutely, yeah.
Not convicted, ideally.
And I will put that even then later on in July, I will put it in my newsletter.
Yeah,
so people can see it there. Dear Fiorella, thank you so much for your time. Was there anything I haven't asked you about? Is there anything you want to tell us more?
Yeah, maybe just to say, of course, I'd be very happy if we have some new customers for our Cheelettos, but also to say, and this is really out to you, to the ladies, if you're interested in becoming better negotiators, you're very welcome to reach out to me as well. And I'm very happy to do one-on-one coaching, or also if you're a group of people, it's always fun to have a little girls outing and learn more about negotiation. So definitely available for that. You find my email address and everything on our homepage.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your ideas and that you have such a strong fantasy and that you did what you dreamt of. And you are a real role model for me, and not just for me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.